Roman achievements and their contributions for Western civilization, which is us today. The main ideas for this video are identify Roman achievements in engineering and in law, and especially describe the legacy of Greco-Roman civilization, meaning how they have influenced us today. The terms we need to know are Greco-Roman culture and aqueduct. And Greco-Roman culture, like Hellenistic culture, is an example of cultural diffusion. If you remember, Hellenistic culture was a combination of Greek, Persian, Indian, and Egyptian cultures. But Greco-Roman culture is a little bit easier to remember if you look at the term. It's a blending of Greek and Roman cultures. And here's some examples here. We have a Greek sculpture. This is an example of idealized realism, where they try to capture a body in realistic form, but they try to make it idealized, make it the perfect form. The Romans took that idea of being realistic, but since they're real practical, they weren't very interested in trying to perfect the human body necessarily, but they wanted to show people in a more realistic form of what a person actually looked like. They didn't try to pretty him up too much. Now, Greco-Roman culture, just remember, it's the cultural mixing of both Greek and Roman traditions. And if you take a look at this picture here, what architectural element of the Greeks do you see in this picture? I'll give you a second to think about it. You should have thought these columns right here. These babies right here are direct examples from Greek culture that the Romans have adapted for their own use. Now, some of their major achievements that we talked about in class the other day. The Romans built many roads to increase trade and to make their military travel and their communication even faster. They were masters of engineering. They used arches and domes to build large, impressive buildings, both public buildings and private buildings for those wealthy enough to afford them. They perfected the arch in their building of the aqueducts, which were basically like water pipelines that traveled, some of them as far as 40 miles, bringing water from the highlands of mountainous areas into the city of Rome, so people had fresh water. The rich and wealthy could have this water in their own homes, but they also provided public fountains and public baths for all classes of Rome, of all citizens at least. Now, the Romans were such great builders that some of these buildings are still in existence today. They stood the test of time, and although some of them are, in ruin, like the Colosseum, one of the major reasons the Colosseum is in ruin because during the Middle Ages, people in Italy took stones from the structure itself and they dismantled it so they could use it for other construction projects. But you can see how great of builders the Romans were, because the rest of the building that hasn't been dismantled is in pretty darn good shape. And another example of how the Romans, especially their engineering and architecture, influenced us today, take a look at the U.S. Capitol building. That's has a very high resemblance to Roman architecture and Greek architecture. You see the columns here, and we got a nice big old dome on top. Now, in terms of law, that was the Romans' most lasting influence, probably their biggest contribution that they gave to us. The 12 Tables was, as we learned in class, a code of law. It was written down. Under the law, everyone was equal, so it was common law. It was common to everyone. And everyone had the right to do things like face their accusers, be considered innocent until proven guilty, and everyone, like we said, was treated equally, or supposed to be treated equally under the law, like in our laws today. The 12 Tables covered nearly all aspects of people's lives: criminal law, tort law with property, marriage, and people's inheritance. And this had a major influence on Western European and U.S. law, and especially today.